There will be time for questions at the end of the discussion. And virtual attendees are welcome to ask questions as well. We are the question and answer function on Zoom. My heartiest welcome to the panelists. Thank you for joining us today, both from here and from India. We realize it's late in the night in India and still you have joined. Thank you very much. So just to set the context for this panel discussion, we are aware that the world is facing existential challenges owing to climate control, when we are also struggling with energy security. By 2050, we need to limit global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees centigrade rise, while, as per the World Bank report of 2022, even till 2030, 574 million houses are likely to remain deprived of electricity. So that's the big conundrum we all face today. At such times, we have a brilliant panel lined up for deliberation with speakers from diverse backgrounds to speak on all issues ranging from scalability of solar to last mile connectivity of solar. The idea is that we should try to assess if solar is going to be that much necessary game changer. If so, then what are the enablers? And if not, then what are the impediments to global growth of solar? Let me introduce Mr. Gyanesh Chaudhary, Vice Chairman and Managing Director of Vikram Solar Limited. I have immense pleasure So, Mr. Gyanesh Chaudhary, Vice Chairman and Managing Director of Vikram Solar Limited, one of the most dynamic and young entrepreneurs in the field of solar energy. Now, as the pioneer in the field of solar energy in India, Mr. Gyanesh Chaudhary is recognized the need to build an environmentally sustainable future for the globe. His vision and business leadership has been instrumental in enabling the clean energy transition globally. He created a 3.5 gigawatt annual photovoltaic panel production capacity and is a leading solar energy. He is passionate about preservation and restoration of historical properties. He has won several awards for his historic restoration. Now that's a passion to have. The company owns and operates a substantial real estate portfolio and focuses on building sustainable, ecologically sensitive, and highly efficient real estate. It also provides consulting services to the states of Massachusetts, the United States government, and banks. Interestingly, the company has worked extensively with the Inspector General's office and the criminal division. Yeah, not to be worried about that. So we know we have a friend who can help us in need. We are very privileged to have with us today the former chairman and managing director of Mrs. NTPC Limited, Mr. A.K. Jha. NTPC Limited, a government of India undertaking. He has also worked as the member MP Electricity Regulatory Commission. He's also served as a member of Global Expert Advisory Council of International Solar Alliance and member of Research Council of National Physical Laboratory, Delhi. Been a member of Government of India Delegation on Climate Change Summit to COP21 at Paris and COP22 at Marrakech. Conferred honorary fellowship by Center for Excellence in Project Management in 2016 for shaping NTPC to its present glory through innovative mindsets and project management process. He led the company's initiative in the area of renewable energy in a big way and created a vision to add 30 gigawatts by 2030. He's credited for the introduction of floating solar plant in India with development of indigenous floater design in collaboration with CIPET. I'm very pleased and it's my honor to introduce you to Mr. David Wilcox, the founder and CEO of ReachScale, who is here in person, who has found time to come down here and who will be moderating the session. Mr. David Wilcox, he has a distinguished career in energy. He's the leader of ReachScale and uses his global network to build consortiums to address global challenges at scale. With a dual interest in business and social progress, Mr. David Wilcox has been a CEO, CMO, and head of business development for a number of technology startups and digital enterprises. He graduated with an MBA from Harvard Business School. So I like to throw the floor open for the discussion as we really consider the fact, is solar going to be the next game changer or the panacea we are all looking for? Thank you. Over to you, Mr. David Wilcox.
Are we going to be able to get the speakers on the screen, please? So I would like to quickly set the context. We've got a whole planet to deal with, but we're going to focus today on India and the US. And I want us all to understand at the end of today what the challenge is. And I also want us to understand how to think about the challenge, okay? So if you go to India and you want to know what the challenge is, who do you ask? His name's Modi. You ask Prime Minister Modi what the challenge is, and he will invariably tell you, because he's a very smart guy and has a lot of smart people working for him, including hundreds of McKinsey guys in the back room. He will tell you that he wants 500 gigawatts of renewable energy by 2030. So let's not think about the total. Today's about solar. Let's focus in on the 300 gigawatts of solar that he wants. Right now, he has 65 gigawatts. So let's just round up to 100. And to keep things simple, let's think about the fact that he needs 200 more gigawatts. 200 more gigawatts in 8 years. All of you math geniuses can tell us that that's 25 gigawatts a year on average. The record in India for gigawatts installed is 7 in 6 months, in the last measured 6 months. So that gives you a really on the ground ability to think about what's required. The one other thing you need to know is what's the unit of scale. Solar power is installed in projects. You need to know what is the unit of scale of a project. Okay. So the largest projects that have been done in India so far seldom exceed 500 megawatts. There's a few larger ones out in the Rajasthan desert, the Gujarat desert. But for our purposes, we will take 500 gigawatts as the unit of scale. What does that mean? It means if you're working on a 50 megawatt project, you're digging your own grave. There's no way you can get to 200 gigawatts making 50 megawatt projects. It will never happen. You have to be operating at the unit of scale, the 500 megawatt project, and you still need 400 of those in 8 years. Remember, 500 into a gigawatt's 2 times 200 is 400. So that's the scope of the challenge. This isn't a question of will it be a game changer. It is a game changer sitting in front of us asking, can you scale me? That's the question. I mentioned in the earlier panel that even though costs have gone down 80% in the last 10 years, they're projected to go down another 60% by 2030. Most of us forget about that. That's absolutely critical to understand the context. Mr. Gyanesh Chaudhary is working on driving those costs down. He's going to be a leader in that area. He's got 3.5 gigawatts of solar panel capacity. That's, think about it, at the 14 gigawatt rate per year that India is currently at, he has 3.5 of those 14 gigawatts coming out of his plants. That's really significant. AK Jha has committed to build 30 gigawatts by 2030. What does that mean? It means he's going to build over 10% of Prime Minister Modi's demand goal himself. That's really, really significant. Now, when you move to the US, you have a slightly different situation, but the numbers are roughly the same, okay? The goal of the Inflation Reduction and Infrastructure Acts is to build tons of renewable energy. At the DOE Tribal Energy Conference, Aspen Institute put out 2 scenarios. The first scenario was business as usual with those acts. 188 gigawatts over 10 years, 18 gigawatts a year, about what India is currently doing, slightly more than what India is currently doing. The max uptake forecast, in other words, if we could actually get our act together and actually make something happen, was 450 gigawatts. Double what we're saying India would do. If you could do that, that is moving the needle. 188 gigawatts doesn't get us anywhere. 450 gigawatts actually moves the needle. And you can run the numbers again, unit of scale 500. How many projects do you need? How many do you have to do a year? How many do you have to do a month? You understand what scale looks like. You can think about how to scale because you have the numbers in front of you. So there's the 2 top countries in the world, except for China. Those are the 2 most important scale opportunities in the world for the next decade. If those 2 countries are able to succeed at scale, we actually are getting somewhere. And if they don't, we aren't getting anywhere. That's how important this topic is. So, Gyanesh, could you talk to us about how India is going to get enough panels to do 25 gigawatts a year fairly soon?
First of all, hello everyone, and thank you for having me. I hope I'm audible. Thank you, Mr. Agarwal, for inviting me for this great conclave. And I think I should be honored to be a part of this great distinguished panel. I would have been there in person, but due to health reasons, I had to stay back. I think the table was set by Mr. Wilcox very aptly. I think some of the countries of the world have a responsibility. I think we rose to the occasion a little late in the day in terms of what climate change initiatives the world is taking now. If we started maybe a few decades earlier, we would have come much further. However, considering what China has done, we can't not acknowledge that with respect to technology, with respect to laying the foundation of building successful utility scale large infrastructure, and is now catering to the world. Having said that, you do it with a capitalist mindset or you do it with a socialist mindset, that is a different discussion altogether, which we're not here to do. However, to talk about the other two nations like India and the US, I think we, as I said, we started late, but we are very well in line to take over the numbers game. So as we speak, in 2010, India and the US both were at a very low scale in terms of megawatts installed on ground. Today, US stands at about 135 gigawatts. India is at about 65 gigawatt, which is a staggering number considering where we started. And these numbers are only going to double and treble as we go along. So I feel that there is a lot of road to cover, but India has significantly taken leaps and bounds of strides in this space, and so has US. And as Mr. Wilcox mentioned, the IRA, I'm sure we'll be talking about that as we go along, but that is a very forward-looking step to build capacity and capability to cater to this huge demand. So I think the world is prepared for the solar deployment.
Thank you. AK Jha, we'd love to hear your plans for doing 30 gigawatts. I was so impressed by that goal. And because of who NTPC is, that will be the lead example for the country if you are able to build at that rate. So please share with us. We don't have your picture up yet, but you're welcome to speak.
Am I audible?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you and good morning to all the panelists. And yes, the target which we have set for ourselves in NTPC is quite humongous, but we realize that unless we set this kind of target, we will not be able to remain the leader which we are in the field of power sector in India. We are the largest power producing company in India with around 17% of the installed capacity and generating around share of 27% of the total energy being supplied. So we all know that the coal is not going to be the permanent solution in looking at the future, and therefore we said that let us have a very tough target of doing 30 gigawatt. Now we have a two-pronged strategy of achieving this. One is that NTPC itself acting as a developer. And the another one is that, you know, there was initially a lot of problems with the power purchase agreement and the discoms were not willing to buy. So we have also facilitated the developers. We had, you know, by giving them the comfort of paying the money if they develop, and we in turn will sell it to the distribution companies, because distribution companies' payment was becoming a big problem. So we also encourage developers to sign power purchase agreement with NTPC. So together like this, we wanted to facilitate the overall target of the country. When this 30 gigawatt target was conceived in NTPC, that point of time, the national target was 200 gigawatt by 2022. And we had a projection of 30 gigawatt by 2032. But then subsequently in COP26, the Prime Minister had scaled up the target to 500 gigawatt of non-fossil fuel sources. Now, out of that non-fossil, the present strength is around 175 gigawatt. And the renewable out of that is around 120 gigawatt. We know solar is around 65. So if you look at the progress of solar, the last year, India did 14 gigawatt, and year before it was 10 gigawatt. There was a 40% jump. So if you do the straight line method, then we need to do in 8 years, 25 gigawatt each. But if we keep on increasing our addition at the rate of 30 to 40% CAGR, then it is very much possible to achieve this target of 200 gigawatt for 200 gigawatt plus by the time we are talking about 2030. Then the major problem in India is that we have most of the panels imported mostly from China and also from Germany and other countries. And we don't have our own manufacturing facilities. As Gyanesh, Chaudhary and the others like him have now started to increase their capacity, which was initially very low. And the government has also come with a scheme of production-linked incentive to promote the integrated manufacturing of solar panels. That means right from the silicon up to the module, the entire thing needs to be manufactured in India. And if you look at, if we have to follow a straight line and add 25 gigawatt every year, and if one industry of Mr. Chaudhary has the capacity of 3.5 gigawatt, then I think 7 or 8 Chaudharys can add and have a manufacturing capacities of 25. And we have many more. We know that there are industrialists in India with deep pockets and they are willing to invest. Ambani's, or there are others also, the Adani's, who have also committed to invest in the manufacturing facility. So going forward, we see that a lot of indigenous manufacturing facility will be developed within the country, and this will enable the faster deployment of the solar panels. And you know that India is able to produce one of the cheapest solar power. With the last tariff, recent tariff was 2.45 rupees per kilowatt, which transforms into 2.9 cents per unit. So the acceptability, the affordability, everything is there. So I don't see much difficulty on installation of or reaching this target of 200 plus gigawatt, additional 200 plus gigawatt. But there are other constraints which we'll discuss as we go along in terms of the transmission infrastructure and other issues. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, AK. So we have a new unit of scale. Did everybody catch that? It's called the Chaudhary. It's 3 gigawatts of panel production capacity. I'm not sure that unit of scale will carry on beyond this room, but for the next hour, let's use it. So one of the reasons I'm moderating this panel is, as Virendra mentioned, we build consortiums. Our consortium in India won the largest distributed solar commissioned project ever commissioned in India, which generally speaking, if you ignore China, means the largest ever commissioned in the rest of the world, sans China. And that's for 500 megawatts on 119 farmer leased land sites across the state of Maharashtra. So we have a 1 scale unit project that is being done in a way that it addresses all of the questions that came up on the prior panel about inclusivity, because it puts the panels in the villages. Now, of course, in Maharashtra, they have very forward-thinking chief ministers. So they come up with ideas like this, which is partially driven by the fact that they're going to pump tons of electricity into the data centers surrounding Mumbai. And it would be politically embarrassing to not have electricity for the citizens in the state and give the electricity to the data centers. So this is also a way to make sure that everybody is taken care of fairly. There are a few other people who got awards under this contract, but we have by far the largest award. And that gives us some other units of scale. So a megawatt costs would be a unit of scale, right? It used to cost in India $600,000. It now costs in India $800,000. It used to cost in the north $1 million. It now costs in the north 1.1 to 1.2 million dollars. So those are a new set of scale numbers. They tell you what the relative advantage is of producing energy in India versus producing it in Europe or the US. It allows you to calculate how much a 500 megawatt project costs. Can anybody give me the number? $400 million. One project. 200 projects, half the number that need 400 projects, the total number at the unit of scale is $160 billion. So when we talk about the challenges, that's the number one challenge. Everything that AK has said about the ability of India and the ability of Gyanesh to build out the capacity and get that stuff available to build is not the gating item. The gating item is where does $160 billion in capital come from to actually deploy it. Now, we don't have time to talk about how difficult it is to raise the money for one of those projects, so we will leave that for another panel. I can tell you that when you bring something of the unit of scale to all the big talkers choke. The World Banks and the IFCs and all those guys, they can't even think about funding a $400 million project because they want a diversified portfolio, which means they're never going to put more than $30 million in anything. So you do not get scale from those guys. They're talkers, they're not doers. So that's all important scale stuff. Now, Ron and I are going to have a little argument here for you, okay? Because we're now going to move to the ground.
Okay.
We're going to move to a city called Somerville. A city who had a former mayor who was famous for saying Somerville is the Paris of the United States. Ron assures me they're glad he's gone. But unfortunately, the new mayor isn't any better. So Ron, tell us about the new mayor.
Well, I'd rather not.
Tell us about the challenge that you and I talked about.
Yeah, well, just to introduce myself, I am the proprietor of a fourth generation family-owned business that is predominantly in the rental housing business. And I thought, well, what am I doing here? I certainly feel a bit out of place because of everything so far has been very macro. I am micro. And, but
Do we request you to be slightly louder?
yeah, certainly. So
Stand up.
I'd rather not.
Yeah.
So I had to go through the process of sort of legitimizing my presence. And I came to the conclusion, first of all, that every solar panel sits on real estate. That's the first thing. And that I, as a medium scale developer, can play a role in the transition to clean energy and improved housing. And I've been asked to talk about some of my frustrations. I want to get into some of that. But to further describe what we do, well, I manage a significant real estate portfolio that's frankly very valuable, but very old. And we've looked at ways to improve it. It's not an easy thing to do. That's the first thing. And the second thing is we also build luxury housing, which we use to basically pay the overhead of the company. And we also build affordable rental housing, which is something that's very hard to do in Massachusetts because there's just no land. And when there is land, it's ridiculously expensive and it's very, very hard to get the numbers to work. We want to do more of that, but it's challenging. So what do we do? Well, we do more than the basics. We are transitioning to all electric housing, heat pumps, solar panels, which I'm a full advocate of. But there are challenges to using solar panels. It limits the architecture, the roof design. Skylights are a problem. Orientation of the building's a problem. I would love to convert my house in the city to solar panels. I can't, trees and whatnot. I have a house in the country, same issue, can't do it. That's sort of frustrating. But what we are doing whenever we can is, as I said, well, we try to future-proof the buildings. The first thing we do is we're transitioning to all electric because we think that is the one energy that is future-proof and allows what will develop down the road to, the structure will be adaptable to what comes down the road. My position about solar is that it is the best that we have right now. And, you know, I dream that technology will change and that we will be able to essentially have every single structure be independent of the grid. As a real estate developer and as a small developer, one might say, well, you know, what keeps you up at night? Well, I'll tell you, it's the vulnerability of the grid. It's highly vulnerable. Putin, who's a madman, he's a madman, and the world is in a mess. And clearly the need is here. It's absolutely here. And when I hear about these large-scale projects and what David's doing, it's a wonderful thing. It's needed. But for somebody like me, it's building by building, and it's a very different thing. It's micro. So again, we try to future-proof the houses. We, if we don't actually install the solar, we wire for solar for the homeowner to install it down the road. We always wire for electric vehicle charging stations, and we use the best that's out there. We do everything we can in terms of windows and doors and the envelope of the building to reduce energy costs. And also we do things that I think are really important, which is to use appliances in the structure that are not only energy efficient, but have longevity, which is a really big deal. I was telling David that we retired a refrigerator in one of our rental units that have been full service since 1938. 4 years ago. 4 years ago. Think about it. And my tenant, who'd been in the apartment for 41 years, asked if we could replace the switch because the light wouldn't go on. Well, I had to tell him, and I was holding back the smile, that I didn't think we'd get parts for it. Now, we retired it. The average life for a new refrigerator is 8 years. That's disgraceful. That's a landfill product guaranteed to be there in 8 years. It's disgraceful. We found a manufacturer that has a compressor with a warranty for 10 years. That's good, but it's all junk. The German products seem to be really good. We try to use those, but you know, very expensive. We just completed what we think is the only single family detached solar net zero house in the city of Boston. It sold for just under $2 million. It was not for the average person. We put in all German products that have fantastic life expectancy. The washer dryer has a 25-year warranty on the DC motor. That makes sense to us, but that's high-end housing. How many people can pay for something like that? Now, one of the issues that we're dealing with all the time, and I'm on the Energy Commission in the city of Somerville, is frankly ignorance. The city has this 2050 goal to be net zero. They are doing everything in their power to prevent it from being realized. It's pathetic. And I get angry, and I have even done things like bringing my law firm in to threaten lawsuits. And I have gotten people removed from commissions that were basically anti-development, that were stopping any kind of improvement in the housing. And the majority of the housing in the city of Somerville is over 100 years old. There are restrictions on condominium conversions. Condominium conversions are really good because developers go in. I did about 150 units in Somerville. They go in, they got buildings, they bring them up to code, they put in energy efficient heating and cooling systems. That's a really good thing. They add solar components if they can. That's a really good thing. All that stuff has stopped. How can a city like Somerville, and I use it as an example, which is a very radical place, politically, socioeconomically, how can a city like Somerville ever reach goals of that kind?
So that's perfect. That's perfect. So here you see the reality of all of our talk when it's actually put to the ground and people actually have to say, am I going to walk? There couldn't be a more talking city than Somerville. And yet they're doing none of the stuff that would be necessary to bring to pass the thing they're so high-mindedly talking about. That is being replicated all across the United States. The great thing about India is they absolutely understand scale. And when they see a problem like this, they go after it completely differently than what you're experiencing here with Ron and I. So that's important. The one other consortium that we are working on, other than the 500 megawatts in Maharashtra, well, there's actually another 2 gigawatts in the queue of other projects we're working on there. But the one other consortium we're working on is a consortium that will take all of that federal money. Now, we can't do anything with that federal money. We just have to comply with what the government wants to be complied with. But what the government wants is big projects. The DOE is bending over backwards to get big projects. So we're building a consortium that will identify groups of communities across the United States who want to collaborate simultaneously on addressing the specific problems that Ron mentioned across all the communities in that region cooperatively, so that they get educated in the process of going through making their choices about what they're not doing and what they have to be doing and how they could be doing it such that their demand for electricity creates these big projects, which then qualify for the funding from the DOE, from the EPA, and so on. Now, that may sound crazy to you, and it sounded crazy to me 3 months ago. We've identified a technology that's used in the governmental areas of another country to do all of the governmental things that they do. And we've figured out how to repurpose this technology so that the whole process I just described can be done online. And then the system will solve for the regional solution based on the preferences of the voters across hundreds of communities. Never been done before. Only way you're going to solve Ron's problems. There has to be a critical mass of citizens that wake up and say, we can't be a 2050 city if we're doing any of these 10 things. We can only be a 2050 city if we are doing these 10 things. And then the city has to stop doing these 10 things and start doing these 10 things. It's the only way to get there, and you can't scale without technology. So there are lots of people trying to do this without technology. It won't work. It will never happen. There has to be a solution where the communities can co-scale and co-design. So that's the other consortium that we're working on. Now, talk to us about how this gets done in India. AJ, maybe you first. Explain to the audience why it's so different to scale in India than it is the way Ron described.
I would like to share one example. In India, in Gujarat, one village named Moderator has been developed as the first modern village with round-the-clock availability of solar power, with megawatt scale battery, solar-based EV charging stations, all feasible rooftop solar panels installed, generating more energy than they required, and greening the grid, and also paying the villagers. Now, this is the model village which has been created, and the idea is to replicate this in the various villages. So that is the community level participation. And I will give you another example of the government's policy intervention on how to help the farmers as well as help the grid in greening. There is a scheme, Kusum, PM Kusum Yojana, KUSUM, which has received very good response from the farmers, where the decentralized grid connected plants of up to 2 megawatt each can be installed by them. And they need to put only 10% of the cost of solar pump. The 30% subsidy is given by the central government, 30% subsidy is given by the state government, and 30% funding is given by the bank. Now, when they start generating the solar power, so they start using their pumps, and whatever profit is generated, once they do not require for agriculture, then they give the power to the grid. And whatever is the profit generated, that bill is paid directly by the distribution company to the bank, till that 30% loan of the bank is paid back. And then beyond that, they start getting their money, the farmers start getting their money, and for all the periods, their pumping cost is zero, because it is solar pump, the pump generating, using the power generated by the solar panels installed by and owned by them. So this is something which now we are targeting to have around 30.8 gigawatt to be added under this scheme, with the financial support of central government to the extent of 34,000 crores. That is over $4 billion. So this is how India is trying to involve the community in being participating in this solar revolution, so that at all level, there are efforts to green the grid, as well as the farmers are benefited in their income.
Do you see the difference? Do you see the difference? The entire system is built for scale. From the ground up, top, middle, bottom, everybody is thinking scale. It's totally different than in the US. The award we won, and I will mention that the JAWs are important players in India. The leader of our consortium is Satish Jha. I don't know if AK knows Satish, but Satish knows AK. And so Satish is another scale leader in India. The Maharashtra government, what's the biggest problem in the US? Siting. Where am I going to put this stuff? In Maharashtra, we were handed the 119 farmer land leases by the second largest cooperative in the country, who did all the land leases coincident with the award of the bid. We never had to spend a minute even thinking about it. See the difference? Huge difference. We need to get there in the US. The system I described earlier is one way to engage citizenry to begin to get there. Gyanesh, do you have an example or two you'd like to share?
I think when you talk about scale in India, I'll give you a crude example. You know, a smallest wedding party is of 1,000 people. So it goes out to say that you know, we certainly do believe in doing things larger than life, but you know, we have the demographic you know, behind us. And last year during COVID, you know, some people say Indians were busy making babies, but we certainly crossed the mark of becoming the most you know, the most populated country in the world. So I think the internal demand is such, and to have a target of becoming net zero by 2070, and to be able to have 42% of the grid powered by non-fossil fuel based energy systems, all of this requires the kind of scale that that needs all of these efforts to be put in place. And I think the Indian government, with the advent of the present Modi government, I think all of these actions were well planned and put in place to be able to make use of these lofty goals and achieve them, so to speak. I think I have to not just mention what has been achieved, but what needs to be achieved. And I feel that there is a lot of ground to be covered. India, which as Mr. Jha said, needs to get to 500 or 550 odd non-fossil fuel based gigawatt generation, and we're sitting at somewhere less than half of that. I think all of this will require a great deal of initiative, which is currently under play. But it's just I think it's a start, and I think these targets are only getting India ready, because India still needs a lot of energy, a lot of electricity. And we as a nation now, I think we're moving away from fossil fuel. I think Mr. Jha would be able to talk about this a little more, that during his times in NTPC, the way coal and other fossil-based technologies were getting deployed, the same kind of deployments are not happening now in NTPC or otherwise, and the entire focus is now moved towards renewable. And now to achieve those scales, you have to, go big. So I think we're doing what is needed, so to speak.
I only wish I could have had a few hundred DOE employees here do this. But I will go myself and I will share it with them.
Right.
So I think we've had a very good discussion, and I'm sure you have some questions. So let's open it up for questions, and please raise your hand and tell us who you are and ask your question.
Yeah, I have a couple questions. So my name is Carlos Irisari. I helped organize the Tufts Energy Conference. I'm a second-year MALD student at the Fletcher School. So first of all, I would like to say that I really appreciate the macro-micro dichotomy. I think it's a very good way to look at the issue. And I have a question on the macro side and a question on the micro side. On the macro side, one thing that I guess I'm concerned about is, so like the scale of that we're talking about here is like hard to wrap your head around. It's like hard to comprehend what it actually means. I'm curious about how India, if they achieve this goal, how India will deal with duck curve related issues, specifically issues related to, having high supply of electricity during the day, and then at night when energy demand increases, perhaps they won't be able to meet that energy demand because, I don't know, battery technology won't keep up, and I'm specifically talking about grid scale battery technology. So I'm wondering if part of this like scaling effort is going to also take a look at, the consequences that scaling might result in, and how that's being taken into account in the scaling process. And then on the micro side, I would like to specifically know what incentives are working. Like why are you future-proofing your houses? Why are you buying energy efficient appliances? Why are you cabling for solar and cabling for EV stations? Apart from, you care about the environment and you have like personal ethics, are there any systematic incentives that are working, and which are they?
Yeah, there are.
Let's let them respond first
Sure.
to the technology. I think we're talking technology to enable solar and renewables to deal with the nighttime.
Yes, we know that there are not enough storage capacity available right now, and therefore the coal-based plants are required to do the balancing. So there is a lot of cyclic operation of existing coal-based plant where we the plant go down their generation to the level of around 40% during the daytime, and they just run at the minimum technical possible load. And then during the evening or night hours, when the demand is more, they ramp up their capacity and try to fulfill. So solar and wind, the renewable is a must run. So if they are available, then the coal-based plants have to scale down their running operation. That is one thing. Second is that we have identified potential of about 95 gigawatt of pump storage. Now the government has recently come with a policy to encourage the faster development of the pump storage scheme, which of course, it has a longer construction period of 3 to 4 years as compared to the battery storage. But if you look at the life cycle costs, the cost of energy, then they are very attractive, and we do not depend on any imported raw materials and other things. So we are not saying that we are not doing the lithium-ion battery. In fact, if you look at the recent tenders floated by the SECI and also by the NTPC, now we are insisting on the round-the-clock supply, the tariff of the round-the-clock supply. So what is happening? The developers are giving quote on the basis of the solar plant and the associated any pump storage plant or the battery storage. They are free to give any kind of combination. So now the round-the-clock power supply is the in thing. And I hope that the recent finding of the huge lithium reserves in Jammu and Kashmir of 3.59 million tons, of course, it will take maybe around 4 years or so to go for commercial exploitation and other things. But then we will be, for the time being, concentrating more on the pump storage. And I think that 95, 96 gigawatt, if it is developed, there's a big if it is developed, that potential is realized, then we will be in a much better position to phase out the coal-based plant. But till such time that it is done, the coal-based plants are doing the balancing, giving the balancing power by going for the cyclic operation. One more thing I would like to point out here, that as Mr. Chaudhary was telling, that of course we are not adding the coal-based plant capacity at the rate we were adding earlier. But if you look at the electricity growth, the demand spurt, this quarter, 2 days before the result has come, that the growth is 8.2% quarter on quarter. Now, the solar energy is not, or any renewable energy is not able to give that kind of a growth in our energy supply. And with China Plus One and Make in India policies, the requirement of electricity is going to only increase. So till such time, the expectation is that India's coal capacity will reach its peak somewhere around between 2040 to 25, and then it will start going down, because we have a responsibility to provide the basic energy to our 140 billion people. So we cannot leave them on the dark. We have achieved the 100% electrification, but as the demand grows for manufacturing sectors and other sectors, we are trying to speed up the solar and wind and all other renewables, including the agri-based biomass. But if they do not meet the requirement, then we are compelled to have more coal-based stations till such time. And as we have seen, even in Europe now, their people are testing out their old coal plants and trying to restart because of the crisis of the fuel, because of the war, which we are all seeing. So probably there has to be a prioritization. When there is a question of survival, then everything will be shut down. You remember what happened during the COVID. The entire world was shut down because that was the question of survival of human beings. So if tomorrow, God forbid, that situation arises, then the mankind will have to take that call. But till such time, the responsibility of individual country to provide the necessary power to meet the sustainable the goals, UN goals. Also, we have to keep on providing electricity so that they are not denied of the basic necessities of the life.
Thank you. Ron?
Yeah, I'll use the example of the net zero house we built in Boston. And I'm giving you information that has been given to me. I don't have direct hand knowledge. But there's a glitch, firstly, in the federal tax system. And from what I understand, if I, as a developer, put the solar panels on the roof, I do not get a federal tax credit, which I could use. And developers really should, because I assure you, there would be solar panels everywhere that developer built properties. What happened in that case is the homeowner was able to get a tax credit of, I think, around $5,800 federal, a reduction in federal taxes for a solar array that I think cost close to $20,000. Now, one of the things we've talked about doing is wiring for the solar panel. And by the way, the paperwork is complex and it was a big deal and very aggravating. We've talked about, and it was hard for the homeowner to get that tax credit. And also we had to talk to 3 CPAs to get clarification as to whether the homeowner could in fact get the tax credit. And there wasn't a consensus about that. And from what I was told, the code is not really clear. We've talked about pre-wiring the house for solar and then allowing the homeowner to add the solar panels and then get the federal tax credit. But the homeowner just wants to move in and have it done. What we did do with that house is we purchased solar panels, which is not that typical. Typically they're leased, but we felt that we were adding value by putting them onto the structure and getting it done. Interestingly enough, that house sold to a young couple, first-time homeowners. He worked for Mobil and she worked for Exxon, but they were in the environmental side of the business, and the house sold within 48 hours. And one of the things that I think is worth saying is that from our experience, people want this stuff. They really do. The educated consumer and the affluent consumer wants solar on the house, and a lot of the banks frankly don't understand that. And it's starting to change, but there was a lot of resistance from the banks for anything like that. In terms of appliances, I want to say that that house had Mitsubishi heat pump systems. My side comment about that is they are the best of the products, and it is almost, with supply chain issues, very hard to get them. We had to wait months and months and months and practically bribe people to get them. In fact, we did bribe them, but we bribed the guy at the counter. We ended up getting, we were short one unit. We ended up getting a chip from California. It cost a fortune. Here's my recollection, that on the household appliances, that's the washing machine, and we used a heat pump washing machine. All the appliances were from Germany. It was about $12,000 worth of appliances. I believe we got about $3,800 worth of tax credits. We were able to get that. I don't know about the Mitsubishis. There is supposedly a credit, but for heat pumps, I can't tell you much more about that.
So
It's not enough.
State level, federal level
Yeah.
tax credit.
I think both.
So just importantly, in terms of scale, all the stuff on the consumer side is important. The heat pumps are the most important. There's DOE money and federal money that's going to go to expand the production of heat pumps. Maxing out the heat pumps every year in every house that they can be in is absolutely critical, but it pales in comparison to the importance of getting 500 megawatt or larger projects installed anywhere in a region where there is land that can be reasonably made available. Because those projects don't have to be individually connected and feed back and forth. They can pump into the grid anywhere it needs to go. Once it becomes visible to people that power during the day is going to be free in the United States. I don't think this will be the case in India, but in the United States, in many regions, power during the day will be free. And that means there are a ton of profit-making opportunities that present that become profit-making because the power is free. And you do those businesses during the day, and you use that free power to create jobs and to create incomes and to create tax revenue to the government so they can give more incentives to the developers. The 15% of the land that this stuff's going to go on, you know who owns it? It's called Indian country. The way you know if the government's scaling is you need to know how many deals they've done with Indian country. Right now it's 0. So the DOE isn't even tracking the 188 from my beginning number, because you can't be tracking the 188 if you've done 0 deals with Indian country. So there's huge incentives to get those deals done, and yet they still haven't been done. We're working on that as well as part of this consortium that I mentioned earlier, is to pull in the Native Americans as initiating these community scale efforts where we organize the communities around the tribal lands and then work out from there. But that's the land thing, the siting thing, the grid thing, those are important. India's made, I believe it's 500 billion in the budget for transmission was the last number I heard. That's huge, so important, so badly done in the United States, badly done. So we need to discover, we need to figure out solutions. We need to get the citizens engaged, but not just in installing efficient equipment, in creating a solution for the whole region that goes to where energy can be produced and gets it to the people who made that happen.
Thank you very much, Mr. Anil Kumar Jha Sahab. It should be around 10 p.m. in the night, and Mr. Gyanesh Chaudhary for being so late up and really enlightening us on the direction the world is heading. Thank you very much, Mr. Ronald Cavallo, for I know how busy you are, and Mr. David Wilcox, of course, who knows scale better than you. Thank you all. Thank you everyone for coming here. That's all the time that we have. And yes, thank you for coming for this morning session, and we invite you to come back for our next panel at 1:30 p.m. that will explore innovations in the nuclear sector. I understand this really having a lot of interest globally. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks from India. Thanks for staying up late.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Agarwal. Thank you.